Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, September 6th, 2012. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, a visit from the beer guy, Brad Magerkurth, who has in his possession a bottle of White House Homebrew. And Chris Colby gives us some ideas on how to use seeds and nuts in our own homebrew. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. Also, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. We also have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing video page on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Here's how that works. When you're thinking, I need to buy that thing on Amazon, doesn't matter what thing you're going to buy, don't go to Amazon first. Go to basicbrewing.com first and click on the Amazon logo on our site. That will then take you to Amazon.com where you can shop just as if nothing ever happened, but the difference is that whatever you buy will get a hunk of that financially. So we greatly appreciate your support. Doesn't cost you any extra, but we know it takes the extra effort to remind or to remember that before you do it. So we greatly appreciate it. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own Magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. You can find our iPhone and Android podcast apps on their respective stores, and the Android podcast app is also on Amazon, too. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well. Let's go into the mailbag. I got a celebratory note from Cortland Heiser in Denver, Colorado. Cortland says, I thought you'd be interested to learn that I brewed a version of your 15-minute pale ale that won the blue ribbon in the American Ale category at the 2012 Denver County Fair. Congratulations, Cortland. I started making 15-minute ales a couple of batches ago as a way of doubling the output of my brew day without adding a significant amount of time. While the grains are steeping on my main batch, I crank out a quick 15-minute beer on the side. I use a lot of shortcuts on the 15-minute batch, including partial boil and no wort chiller. I just dump 2 gallons of concentrated wort into the fermenter and add 3 gallons of cold tap water. I don't even filter out the hops when I do this, Cortland says. I just dump everything in and pitch the yeast. I don't do a secondary fermentation either. I let the beer sit on the yeast in primary for 3 to 4 weeks, then keg it and start drinking. It's about as quick and easy as home brewing gets. And Cortland says, I find it pretty interesting that a beer made with so many shortcuts and elementary techniques could win a BJCP judged competition like the Denver County Fair. I don't know how many other beers mine was up against, but a friend who volunteers at the fair told me that there were so many entries that they had to move the competition to a bigger room and that the judging itself lasted over 6 hours. I might dismiss the win as a possible fluke, except that my brown ale, also made with a ton of shortcuts, took second place in the same competition. Cortland says, I credit the brewing experiments on your podcast with giving me the courage to keep it simple and avoid overcomplicating my beer-making process. Well, that's awesome. Very cool. Congratulations again, Cortland. If you take care of the important things like cleanliness, sanitization, fermentation temperature, pitching rates, etc., shortcuts can apparently pay off. So that's great news. By the way, I did a 15-minute boil extract batch this past weekend as a part of the No Chill collaborative experiment that we're doing with BYO and the Australian National Homebrew Conference. I'm very excited to see how that turns out. And if you're not familiar with the 15-minute process, look on YouTube to see our video and how that's done, and also on our feed, of course, our Basic Brewing video feed. You essentially just do an extract batch. You steep the grains as you're bringing up your water to temperature, and then you only boil for 15 minutes. But the thing is that you double the amount of hops that you were going to use for bittering at 60 minutes and put those at 15 minutes. And you not only shorten the amount of time that you're boiling, you also increase the hop flavor and aroma for your beer. So it's a very fun process. Brian in Boise, Idaho. Brian in Boise, Idaho sent me a link to a study from the University of Bristol that suggested that people who drink from straight-sided glasses, drink more slowly than those who have curved drinking glasses. Very interesting. We didn't consider that aspect in our glassware collaborative experiment from years past. It has something to do with the fact, apparently, the experimenters say that there is more volume in the top half of the curved glasses than in the bottom half. So apparently people perceive that they're drinking the same amount in the same amount of time as the people with the straight-sided glasses, but they're actually drinking more. Our buddy Fred Johnson in North Carolina had a thought after our previous show with Tyrone Harris's experiment with late hops and different yeasts. Fred says, as you know, the first wort into a fermenter from a big batch would be exposed to the hot wort and late hops for the least amount of time, whereas the last wort into the fermenter would be exposed to the hot wort and late hops for the greatest amount of time. Unless Tyrone distributed the wort to all fermenters simultaneously by using a manifold, he introduced another significant uncontrolled variable into his experiment, the various time the wort in each fermenter was exposed to the late hops. Very interesting. I sent Fred's comment to Tyrone, and he replied, very true. I had thought about that and meant to mention it as a significant source of error. The runoff for a batch that size takes a long time. If I tried the experiment again, I would either whirlpool chill the whole batch or counterflow chill and transfer the entire batch into a holding tank and then fill the fermenters. Tyrone says, tell Fred I said, good catch, and I wish I'd covered that error in the podcast. So something to consider in the next iteration of that experiment. Thanks to Fred and again to Tyrone. Part of the scientific process is peer review. So, you put your results out there and you let others look at it, critique it, and then try to duplicate the results. It's the way that science works. Okay, now, I'm sure you've seen the story all over the beer-related media. This past weekend, the White House released recipes of the homebrew that's being brewed in the kitchen there. They also released a video showing the chefs, who are the brewers, and the process that they use. They're still at a very basic stage. They're using steeping grains and extract. Nothing wrong with that, but they're also using local honey produced on the White House grounds to give their beers a very local character. Apparently, the stuff's pretty good. The latest round of media attention to White House homebrew was kicked off by the president giving a bottle of the beer to a home brewer and beer lover at a coffee shop campaign stop in Iowa. The recipient of that brew is Brad Magerkurth, and I tracked him down to hear the story directly from the source. Well, Brad Magerkurth, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio. Now, you have in your possession something that a lot of people are talking about. What have you got?
Well, I've got a bottle of Barack and Michelle's homebrew, and the cooler thing about it even is the fact that it has no label, which, I would suspect from my many years of homebrewing, I started brewing in fall of 1988, that it was meant for their own drinking, on the bus, and he just pulled it out of there and gave it to me.
Now, tell the story. I'm sure you've told it 1,000 times, but tell the story of how you got the bottle.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I have a good buddy from California like me who's a refugee here in the Midwest, and we were down to see Peachtree Brewing Company, which is in Knoxville, Iowa, about 50 minutes outside Des Moines. And, of course, the brewery wasn't open because everybody sleeps until 10:30 when they own a brewery. I'm just kidding. But we stopped in a little coffee shop. And right before we got in the coffee shop, it was odd because there was a guy who was out front wanding, and he had the little Matrix, earpiece, but he wasn't dressed in any other way. And I thought, they have a Homeland Security Day one day in Knoxville where they try to practice up or whatever. We weren't thinking about it. We get to the coffee shop, and people were talking that the president would be by in a few minutes. And to tell you the truth, we weren't really thinking about it. It seems like you wonder yourself why in the world the president would be out in the middle of Knoxville, Iowa. Not that it isn't a nice little town. And up shoots Black Forest One about three or 4 minutes later, we're sitting there with our biscuits and gravy and coffee, and the security came in, and Obama came in and started to work in the room.
Now, how did the subject of beer come up?
Well, for me, I like to say, for 15 years plus, I've been taking a commission off of something that sells itself, which will show you my skill level, which is I fell down the ladder of employment from every skilled job until I was selling beer, which is something people just can't make go away, even with laws. And if you talk with me, or you come by the house in Bloomington, Minnesota, you won't be around for more than a couple minutes before you are either handed a beer or we start talking about some level of brewing or something like that. I've been able to travel the world on beer, and it's a lot of fun. And that's what I'm out doing today, is I'm out huffing it on the street selling beer.
And you work for the Artisan Beer Company. We got to get a plug in.
Artisan Beer Company. Yep, Artisan Beer Company. And thank you very much. We're based out of St. Paul, Minnesota, and we do craft mead, cider, and then beer. I love all those things. And don't tell anyone. I love wine and some distilled spirits, but beer is always the closest thing to my heart.
So you said, "Hi, Mr. President. I'm Brad Magerkurth, the beer guy."
Yeah, I said, "Hey, I'm Brad, the beer guy," and I've got my little spiel where I said, I'm taking a commission off something that sells itself, and he said, "What are you doing down here in Knoxstone?" I said, "Well, we're going to see a brewery that's literally 150 yards around the corner, but those guys aren't awake yet. We figured we'd get some coffee and just kind of liven up." And he said, I brew a beer." And I said, "No way, really? Tell me about it." And he said, "Well, we've got a beehive that's out in the White House garden that the girls in Michelle dug up and put together, and we use some of that honey to make a beer." and everybody's jaw kind of dropped, because this guy is so smooth. I mean, regardless of what your politics are, and I won't get into that, his shoulders are down, his hands are in his pockets. This is a guy who can walk around and talk on the south side of Chicago. If you've ever been there, you better be able to talk and tell a good story. So before we knew it, he said, "You know what?" He goes, "I'd love to get you guys a beer. Would you like that?" And I said, "That would be totally awesome." And he sent his Edward Kang, his assistant, his traveling aide, out to the bus and got a beer, gave it to Obama, and then he turned around and gave me a third handshake, which I thought was awesome, and said, "Here's the beer. We'd love to get a review on it."
And have you opened it yet?
No, we have not. There is quite a bit of debate here in Minnesota and the brewing community and people at work, and of course my wife's hit me with a rolling pin on the head and saying I better be at that table when that beer comes open.
And you want it now. A cynical person would think eBay.
I'll tell you what. The three gifts of being married are being, number one, married with children. If you are married with children, no matter how much money you make or whatever lottery tickets you find, that's going to dry up rather quickly. And number three, if you're selling beer for a living, it's kind of I believe in beer karma. The president gave it to me as a gift, and that would be pretty cynical of me. If I want the world to be a cool place with the wheels greased by beer karma, I'm certainly not going to sell. If I did, I'd give the money to charity. But I think that the ethical thing to do would be to try the beer and send a review to them. And last Friday, I got an email from the White House. They said, "Look, have you tried the beer yet? What do you think of it?"
So they're following up.
Yeah. I told them right away. I said, "I'm not going to tell you my political affiliation, but the fact that you're into beer is cool, and we're just going to enjoy that." That's what I like about beer, is it brings people together.
Yeah, amen. I've been doing this podcast for a long time, since 2005, and we have, I think, managed to keep politics out of it. And this is a tricky situation because, it's the White House. There's a president. He belongs to a party.
Right.
And I'm not going to say, who I am going to vote for. I may not vote for anybody. Who knows? But one thing that we can all get together, the people who listen to the show, is our love of good beer. And, you got to think that homebrew in the White House is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, there are so many divisive things in our world. I'm just hoping whether you drink herbal tea or filtered water or beer or whatever it is, that it helps bring people together over a table so you can talk. And that's part of the social purpose. It's a social lubricant. And, there's there's party, but, as I mentioned in a couple articles, I remember seeing an ale works that was being unearthed at Mount Vernon, and this must have been, 25 years ago when I was out there. So, beer has been a part of many of these people, regardless of their affiliations. They were gentlemen farmers. They had money, and they had lands, and they were making beer. I mean, it's after you've made your bread, you've only so many uses for grains. Then you make some beer.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the original story about the White House homebrew back when they were serving it at a Super Bowl party. I guess it was last year. But I tried emailing the White House to try to get recipes or to get access to the brewery there. But you were the kind of keystone in getting this the wall taken down on the whole recipe and seeing the setup inside. So you yourself were a part of presidential beer history.
I'm at an age. I'm 42, going on 43. I don't believe in chance encounters. I believe that things happen for a reason, and I've been passing out the good karma. God, when I was a young man, I was passing out beer left and right for people to try, just on the cuff, and that's how when I made my own company, I spent $65,000 just giving out beer samples, and I wouldn't recommend that to everybody, but it worked for me. I was a little Robert Rodriguez with a credit card, and it comes back. It just takes a while for that circle to come around. So that's super cool. Yeah, I'm very proud of that, and everybody's been very gracious. And sometimes a beer can cheer your day up if you're having a pretty bad day too, or you need somebody to talk to. You can sit down over a drink, public house, the original meeting, and talk to people. Hopefully it spurs conversation. And I thank you calling me so we can talk about it.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward, as everyone else is, to your review. I'm sure that it will be splashed across, all channels of beer media when it happens. So,
sure. We're going to get some local hotshot brewers and maybe a legislator or two who's not going to wear a bunch of lapel pins. We'll put him in some cargo pants and T-shirts with the rest of us beer guys and sit down and have it and enjoy it together, and enjoy it as a piece of conversation. So, yeah, make sure you do get to my email there so I can send you a review on it. We'll be happy to post a little video of us, having that beer and probably some other beers together.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time and congratulations.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And for everybody out there who's out there making beer, if you like to cook, you can make beer. And if you can make beer, you can eventually make a good meal. And trust me, guys, if you're a guy in your home brewing, a good meal can help bring in a good wife.
There you go. and a good husband if you're a female brewer. We can't.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. Shout out to Denise Jones at Moylings in Novato, California, where my brother and I used to sit down and have beers. GABF, multiple decorated female brewer.
There you go. Cheers, Brad.
All right. Cheers to you, man.
Well, thanks again to Brad. We look forward to hearing his review of the White House homebrew. I think he's only got one bottle, so he'd better be careful how many people he invites to sample. He may only wind up with just a sip of the precious stuff. I got a note from George, who says he's in an undisclosed location. He says, I have to wonder if the president is aware of the federal regulation that limits the amount of beer that a household can produce to 200 gallons per year. I sincerely hope that Mr. Obama enjoys the White House beer so much that he finds it necessary to brew more than 200 gallons per year. If this happens, perhaps the legislature will be encouraged to review the 200-gallon limit and increase it. Well, first of all, don't hold your breath on the legislature agreeing on anything. But thanks, George, for that note. One step at a time, maybe. First of all, let's get homebrewing legal in all 50 states first, And along those lines, I'm hoping that seeing the homebrew process at the White House should add some legitimacy to those who are trying to get homebrewing legalized in Alabama and Mississippi. I mean, some of those legislators down there think that brewing beer is the same process as making meth and just as dangerous. So maybe if they see the video of the White House brewers making beer there on the stove, maybe they'll think again about reconsider their position on legalizing homebrew toward the positive. While we're talking about meth, now that we have the recipes from the White House, we need the recipe for Schrader Brow from Breaking Bad. That's the next thing that we should all get together on the internet to ask for is the recipe for Schrader Brow from Hank Schrader on Breaking Bad. The one thing that I'd look at in Hank's recipe would be the amount of priming sugar that he's using. Okay, on to more nutty and seedy things. Chris Colby, editor of Brew Your Own magazine, joins us to talk about an article from the upcoming issue on brewing with seeds and nuts. Chris Colby, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
James, thanks for having me on the show.
We're going to talk about nuts today, and I'm going to try desperately not to slip into the junior high level of comedic attempts at humor.
I'm not guaranteeing anything.
So we've got an article by Christian Lavender, and I believe he's from down around your neck of the woods down there?
He's an Austin, Texas homebrewer. He runs the website kegerators.com.
There you go.
There you have it.
And he has 4 recipes: a smoked pumpkin saison, a roasted pecan doppelbock, a toasted sunflower hefeweizen, and a torched pistachio pale ale. Very interesting. Now, there are probably some things that you need to think about if you were thinking about brewing with nuts or seeds. What might those be?
Well, the first and the overarching thing would be the oil content. A lot of homebrewers are very aware of the fact that in a finished beer, any oil you add is going to kill the head. Oil makes a slick on the surface of water, and it prevents, as bubbles come rising up from the beer, it prevents them from reaching the surface and forming foam. So a lot of homebrewers are going to worry a little bit about the oil and the finished beer. So in the article, he goes into ways to minimize that, and he actually found with his beers that head retention, foam production really wasn't a problem.
So I guess you can counteract that by choosing different ingredients to increase the head and sort of, like I say, counteract the action of those oils in the nuts.
Yeah, there's a couple things you could do. One is just to try to get rid of as many of the oils as possible. Second, like you say, you can add a little bit more wheat malt or whatever. But another thing to remember is that, one thing, if you're serving beer from a keg, if the oils are floating on the surface, the dip tube is at the bottom. If you're serving beer from a bottle, it's going to be up at the top, and you may be able to pour out from under. That might be a bit of a trick, though. But yeah, and then of course the final thing to remember is that some people have done experiments, specifically Grady Hull from New Belgium Brewing, using small amounts of oil, very tiny amounts of oil, as a substitute for aeration during fermentation. So if you if you had an ingredient that was oily, somewhat, made a reasonable attempt to remove the gross excess of oil, but added it either in the mash or in the boil, which that's not the tack that he took in this article. But if you did it, then the oils would be there during fermentation, and the yeast would have a good chance of soaking a lot of those up.
Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, they used olive oil in that experiment,
yep.
And it didn't take much at all.
No, it was tiny. Like on a homebrew scale, it would have been less than a drop.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about that. But one thing that you would want to think about when you are selecting the nuts to brew with or the seeds to brew with, you don't want the salted ones or the seasoned ones.
No, yeah, you wouldn't want have any that have been treated that way seasoned, because then you wouldn't be in control of what you're adding to the beer, and also just adding all that salt is, I don't know, probably not going to be a big deal, but start with just the raw ingredients. And then the other thing, of course, a lot of these for these nuts or seeds, you'd want to roast them a little bit, or roast them or toast them, or somehow bring out the flavors a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about he had 4 different approaches to preparing these seeds. Let's start with the smoked pumpkin saison, where he actually smoked, I believe, whole pumpkins in his smoker along with seeds on sheets as well.
Right. Yeah, he took those little bitty pie pumpkins, not the Halloween ones, which don't taste as good.
Right.
But the small ones that are designed for pumpkin pie and the like. And he I think quartered them and scooped out the seeds and just smoked all of it in his smoker. Let's see here. The instructions he gave was
about 3 hours, he said.
Yeah, at about 250 to 300 Fahrenheit. And that'll soften up the pumpkin and make it ready for mashing. And, alternately, you can, as an option, a lot of people just roast pumpkin seeds. And you can do that on a cookie sheet, too. Mm-hmm. They'll brown up at 325 to 350. They'll brown up within 10 to 15 minutes. And that's not what he did, but that's an option if you want to bring out that flavor a little bit.
And if you're adding something like pumpkin to the mash, you probably want to add some rice hulls as an insurance policy against getting a stuck sparge.
Pumpkin, yeah, from experience, I know that pumpkin is very it's what's the word there? It's fibrous. It's got all that the fibers in it, and it's also just very gloopy. You get too much pumpkin per grain, and it starts setting up like a little block of cement. So yeah, rice hulls is a good idea.
Gloopy glop gloopy. I think they would have
glop gloopy.
They would have said it from the musical Hair. Good morning, sunshine. Steve Wilkes did a pumpkin beer where he roasted seeds as well, and of course we didn't do a side by side with and without seeds, but it's at least fun to roast up the seeds and get the kitchen smelling really good and put those into the mash, and it was a good beer. But of course the traditional pumpkin beer is all about the pumpkin pie spice, but this is a smoked pumpkin saison. So how did Christian approach that?
He did use the a sort of traditional mix of pumpkin pie spices, but then he smoked the pumpkin and used the saison yeast, so it starts at the sort of usual starting point for a pumpkin beer, but sort of moves it over into sort of a Belgian-y, smoky area.
Well, it sounds tasty. It sounds like a nice pairing.
Did I ever show you those pictures of that year I grew giant pumpkins and then fermented a batch inside a pumpkin?
Yeah, I think so. How did it work out?
It ended up tasting a lot like raw pumpkin. More so than even the biggest pumpkin fanatic would ever really want.
One of those things that's better seen than tasted.
Yeah, the picture looked great. People liked that. The beer was sort of kept under wraps.
Well, it's nice to it's nice to be honest about these things. We can learn from your less successful attempts as well as your successful attempts.
I want to try it with a watermelon next year.
Ooh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, I grew a few this year, but none of them were really colossally sized. because I want to make sure I get like a whole 5-gallon batch in one,
Yeah.
or else it's just boring.
Roasted pecan doppelbock. So, I mean, this is something that you would think, a style that you think that would pair with a nice, sort of dark tasting roasted pecan.
Yeah, this is just a big strong malty beer as the base with pecan. In this one, he has it in the mash. Two different. It's a step mash, and he adds a little bit of. He adds a cup of crushed pecans for the first step, and 2 cups for the second step. So, that was pretty straightforward. And with that one, I would expect. Pecans are fairly oily, but given that you're doing it in the mash, you're probably gonna lose some oil just in the mash tun. Also, depending on how you rack it over from after cooling from the kettle to the fermenter, you have an opportunity to, if it's an oil slick on top, you have an opportunity to leave that behind.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this sounds like a good recipe. He actually served these at a party last year when he brewed them, and I was invited, but I couldn't make it. So,
so it doesn't count. So how did he prepare the pecans?
Just roasted them, or roasted or toasted, however you want to think of it, on a cookie sheet.
He says about 5 or 10 minutes at 350.
Yeah.
And then he chopped them up. I used pecans in my fruitcake barley wine, where I used all the ingredients that you would put in a fruitcake. Instead of making a barley wine to go into a fruitcake, I put all the specialty ingredients that you put in a fruitcake in the barley wine. And part of that was roasted pecans, and I chopped them up, and they just kind of bobbed around on top of the wort. So maybe putting them in a mash tun and giving them some time to sort of absorb into the wort as it's in the mash tun, maybe that would be a better approach. Because, like I said, I'm not sure how much flavor impact I got from just adding them to the boil, because they just kind of floated around. And at the end of the boil, they were still pretty much, they looked the same as when they went in the beginning.
Yeah, there's a brewery here in Austin called 512, and they do a pecan porter.
Mm.
And I'm not sure how they handle the pecans, but it's something that's doable and can be good when it's done right. So, yeah, it's definitely, especially if you like Doppelbock, maybe worth trying.
Now, doesn't Shiner also do a pecan beer? I think they do like a peach pecan beer or something like that.
They've got one called Ruby something that's like Texas grapefruit, and maybe it's got pecans in it too. I don't know.
We'll just say it. Oh no, or maybe there's one in Mississippi as well. Lazy Magnolia maybe has a pecan beer. I don't know. I'm just making this up. This is what happens when you don't have Google in front of you.
Let me try it.
I'll play some tunes on the ukulele while you look that up.
Yeah, Lazy Magnolia.
There we go.
512 pecan. And they also have a whiskey barrel double pecan porter.
Ooh. So again, I mean, did he worry? It looks like he didn't worry too much about the oils from the pecans.
I don't think he worried about it at all.
Yeah. Now, sunflower seeds. He did a sunflower Hefeweizen.
Yep, a dark Hefeweizen.
A dark Hefeweizen. So how would that pair with the style?
There's a good question.
He roasted the sunflower seeds at 450 degrees, so a higher temperature, that's 232 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 minutes, so much longer than he did the pecans. And then let's see, how did he treat the sunflowers in the beer?
Using dry seeding, quote unquote, just like dry hop. or dry porking, as we had on that other episode. Bacon beer.
Yeah, I was trying to get away with not saying dry nutting, but
Yeah. He steeped his nuts in the secondary. That's how he did it.
And where did he put those seeds? In a bag. Didn't he use a bag?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure he put it in it. Yeah.
So dip your nut bag in the
Nut
fermenter.
bagging.
Oh. We can't help ourselves. So again, sunflower is a seed that people use to generate oil, and it would be a very oily seed. Would roasting the seeds at that high a temperature for the longer amount of time, it seems like that would drive off some of those oils.
It certainly would drive off some of the more volatile ones. I'm not sure, like, to what degree the roasting would reduce the oil content. And in this case, you're adding it to secondary, so it's like finished beer. There's no opportunity for the yeast to get a crack at it. In this case, I think if you're kegging it, you would rely on a lot of the fact that the oil is going to float to the top of the keg and your dip tube's at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're bottling, I don't know what you do. Maybe if you're in your bottling bucket, if you took a look at the top of the wort and saw a slick, like maybe drop a couple paper towels on it, and then bottle quickly so that the whatever contamination might be in the paper towels isn't going to have time to soak into the beer.
Or you could just rack out from under it.
If you just quit bottling at a certain point.
And he said that you can control the amount of sunflower seediness by taking the bag out in the secondary when it gets to the level that you like.
Yeah, that's one that he sampled as he went. Tasted the beer, and he recommended with the dark roast on the sunflower seeds, not leaving it too long.
Now the pistachio pale ale, or I think it's actually pistachio pale ale, if you want to be correct to the Italian language, maybe. The pistachio pale ale took quite a bit more preparation.
Yeah, in this one he first he roasted it with a little propane torch, the kind you use to make like creme brulee and all that. So I mean that part could be replaced by toasting it in the oven too. But then he basically made a liquid extract of it by boiling the roasted pistachios. Then he froze it and scraped, the fat off the liquid he had, and he added the liquid mixture minus the fat to the secondary. Mm. So a different approach.
So pistachios, I guess you could do something similar with all the others as well.
Yeah, I mean he sort of hits the range of, except for adding things in the boil, he hits the range of doing things. He's got stuff added in the mash. He's got stuff added in secondary. He's got a variety of different ways that he handled it.
And he had lots of American hops into the beer, of course, being
sure.
a pale ale.
Yeah. He used Palisades hops on this one. That's a newer variety. I haven't tried those yet, actually.
And he used a Nottingham ale yeast, which he says was highly flocculent and highly attenuative, and the pistachio character came through nicely with the lowy, fruity esters. So I would imagine, you would want to pair your yeast with the nuts to make sure you didn't have any kind of a clash with those. Which it makes sense. I'll
leave that alone.
It's difficult trying to be mature.
It's so hard to be mature.
But again, the smoked pumpkin saison seems like it would be a very natural pairing because the saison, has that kind of farmyard, slightly funky kind of thing going on, and fruity as well. And it seems like that would be a very complimentary one.
Yeah, saisons also in Belgian. Some are actually spiced, and some are it's just the yeast that produces the spiciness.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so making a more sort of North American traditionally spiced beer, but making with the saison yeast is I don't know, it's a nice twist on the whole thing.
And one thing that he mentioned that I also wouldn't have thought of, he mentioned that you might want to attempt to malt the pumpkin seeds. So essentially sprout them and then dry them, and maybe get some changing of the character of the seeds, kind of like when you malt barley or malt wheat or malt whatever grain you want to brew with.
Yeah, that would be an interesting trial to try to malt pumpkin seeds. I've thought about trying to malt like pinto beans or some form of bean and make a beer out of that sometime, but haven't got around to that particular crazy experiment yet.
I'm just wondering if enzymes are created during the malting process, no matter what you try to malt. I would assume there's a potential.
Yeah, it should be basically the same. You're activating that because all seeds have the, they have a supply of starch somewhere, although others may have oils too. It just, I don't know if you would be able to use the same temperature regimens. That might vary by plant too. Because you're talking in the case of grains or in the case of, malts, barley and wheat and rye and all the grains that they malt, they're all, they're all grains, they're all grasses. And in these other ones, you're talking about, fruits, and they're more distantly related. And, you might have to sort of figure out a temperature regime that works better.
And then drying the bean seeds after you sprouted them would be trickier than drying grain, since the individual kernels of the grain are so much smaller and hold less moisture.
Yeah, you'd have to. I think drying would go longer, and then you'd have to experiment with kilning them to the right degree.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, malting barley has been genetically bred, not genetically engineered, but bred for hundreds of years now with professional tasting panels figuring out the best. If you started with just plain old beans from the grocery store, you would expect at least that your first try wouldn't be necessarily producing the best beer in the world, but you never know until you try.
Yeah. So all in all, an interesting article, and I always like to read stuff that expands my horizons as far as brewing ingredients and brewing techniques. Oh, and before we go, there's a couple of special issues of BYO coming out.
Yeah, we recently put two special issues out. One is 30 beer styles. It's 30 of Jamil's columns, different beer styles, and the other one is a guide to kegging, which is goes everything from basic kegging to how to set up a stout system, how to set up how to brew real ale with casks, and also has a big section on building stuff. And Andy Sparks actually has an article in that.
Ah, well, there you go.
Yeah, his intro to kegging article that was published a few years ago.
Well, there you go. Andy is showcased again. Good for him.
Yeah, good article on by him.
Well, very nice. We'll look for these articles in the upcoming Brew Your Own. I've got my my edition of the no-chill experiment in the fermenter. I brewed that this past weekend, the holiday weekend. So we'll be ready for that experiment. And my goal is to have the data form online, hopefully by the time that people hear this episode, and I hope at least by the end of the week, so that people can start getting their data in. And I'm very interested to see how that comes out. And our collaboration with the Australian National Homebrew Conference in next month? It's coming up real soon. I appreciate it, Chris.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks again to Chris. If you want a free issue of Brew Your Own magazine, just click on the ad on basicbrewing.com. And if you decide to subscribe after reading that issue, you'll be helping to support this podcast. And look for the data form for the chilling collaborative experiment at basicbrewing.com/experiment. And we look forward to your data. And what I may do is post my data as it goes along. Not the tasting part, but maybe just how I went about my process, my brewing process. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. Please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All-Grain, Low-Tech Lagering, and Decoction Mashing, an Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our website. We've got combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time, and you can check out our shirts as well in the store. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Periodic Table of Beer Styles Decorative Poster and the Batman Handbook, the Ultimate Training Manual. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.